Welcome to the show that your parents, the PTA, and the asleep don't want you to hear. The Helios blog. Today on PiersMorgan, Israel has more enemies than ever before. I wonder if this will scale up to a regional conflict. That's probably what everybody's thinking.
The reason she's alone is because she's difficult.
Women are not accepting the bare minimum.
Women fuck men they respect.
All the women who say things like, I'm strong, independent, I don't need no man, like, y'all impress me.
Women just gaslight each other and say what they want to hear.
Was what Hamas did on October the 7th an act of terrorism?
The killing by...
Or entrenched as it goes on. What is your feeling about where we are now with this war and indeed the widening conflict with Israel apparently planning a ground incursion into Lebanon?
Well, that initial interview, there were three things that I stated which have since come clearly to fruition. So the first thing that I stated was that Mark Regev belongs in The Hague. Israel is currently in the ICJ charged with genocide. I also said that what Israel was doing in Gaza in an accumulative way over decades would amount with the military operation that they were about to launch to genocide. And the third thing that I said, which has also now been proven to have been the case, is that the Israeli military unfortunately implemented the Hannibal Directive on October 7th. And that, just so viewers are aware, is when Israel, of course it was initially developed in Lebanon while trying to suppress the Lebanese population and stop them from battling the Israeli occupation. And it's whereby Israel takes measures to kill the captives who are Israeli that have been taken by the other side. Now that happened on October 7th and it's since...
My lord, they killed their own people?
It's been proven in three different cases. It happened, unfortunately, after...
It's been denied by Israel, to be clear.
It hasn't, though. It's been denied by certain upper echelons of the Israeli political establishment, but there have been key figures within the Air Force that have acknowledged that this has taken place. It's also been revealed by the Al Jazeera investigation, and other places, too, have gone very deep into it.
But you wouldn't say that the absolute vast majority of people killed and wounded on October the 7th were indeed killed and wounded by Hamas, because apart from anything else, Hamas were boasting about it and filming it as they were doing it.
I think actually the majority of people that were killed on October 7th and off the back of the October 7th were the Palestinian fighters that entered into what is considered to be Israel.
Yeah, but we know
because they were killed, they were run over by cars, their bodies were dismembered.
Wait, what? I'm confused.
Footage that came out of them being killed.
You feel sorry for the Hamas terrorists
No,
that came
I'm
in?
stating objective facts as a journalist that has researched this topic.
But what about the 1,200 people who they murdered and the 7,000 they wounded?
No. Hundreds of those people were killed when Israel implemented the Hannibal Directive.
That's simply not true.
It simply is true.
It isn't.
I see. So we have what? A biased journalist or a brainwashed journalist, or what's really going on here?
Encourage you in the spirit of journalistic inquiry and curiosity to really look that up.
It's already been thoroughly investigated.
It absolutely has not
But
been.
it has, Lowkey.
It's been investigated by Al Jazeera. It's been investigated by trustable news sources that have found this to be the case.
No, it's not true that hundreds of people in those named casualty numbers on the Israeli side
were killed by Israel.
No,
it's a fact. It's a documented fact. It's a documented fact. And you know what else? If you were to study...
Okay. Yes, we always like when people point at us, telling us how we're wrong. People love that body language.
Those cars, which were put forth as evidence that Hamas had killed those people fleeing the Nova Festival, the order came directly from the Israeli Air Force. This is a mass Hannibal. This is a dead zone. No cars will pass.
Did you watch the documentary? Did you watch the documentary last week on BBC Two?
No.
About the music festival? right? You
No.
literally see Hamas fighters with their GoPros going from car to car, murdering people.
That happened. Yeah, that happened.
Why are you trying to diminish the scale of what was going on?
I've just said that happened. That doesn't equate to diminishing what you've just
It doesn't
stated.
say hundreds.
Yes, but you are diminishing the numbers by saying of those 1,200, hundreds were done by Israel towards Israel.
You're diminishing Apache helicopters bombing cars that contained civilians. You're diminishing all of the Israeli captives that have been killed by Israeli airstrikes. Israeli captives have come out of Gaza and said very clearly that actually they were scared of being killed by Israeli airstrikes.
Why are
They
there
were not.
hostages at all?
Well, this is, of course, an issue of 70 years of occupation, of dispossession, of ethnic cleansing,
You
of
wouldn't support the
attritional
taking of hostages,
genocide.
including Holocaust survivors and babies. You wouldn't support that.
I wouldn't take hostages, no.
So should they hand them back?
I think if you look historically at where the return of actual hostages has happened, you look at the case of Gilad Shalit, this was a case where an Israeli soldier was given back in exchange for the release of Palestinian prisoners. What you've actually seen in this case is a massive increase of Palestinian prisoners who are being tortured. There's been examples of rape within Israeli military camps. The rapists have come out and become celebrities within Israeli society. 68% of the Israeli population say they oppose the prosecuting of people that have been implicated in rape within the dungeon system. And if you really look at it, Israel has far more chance of returning hostages by negotiating for their release than by airstriking them.
But
What Israel has done
got-
as part of this campaign is airstrike and kill its own captives. The captives.
How
that are
would
held
you
on
have
the other side.
responded on October the 8th if you were running the Israeli government?
Ultimately,
The biggest terror attack on your
Ultimately-
people ever.
Nice question, Piers.
Ultimately, it is within the interests of everybody, especially those who identify as Israelis currently, to end Zionism. Zionism has dispossessed and disempowered and killed people on an industrial scale. Its maintenance requires
Interesting. Is he really comparing Zionists to who I think he's comparing them to? That's... You know what it sounds like? You know when, like, a kid gets beaten up by his parents and then he becomes a bully himself? Anyway.
4 generations of Palestinian refugees scattered throughout the Middle East, the highest population of refugees there is in the world. Its maintenance requires the constant repression of Palestinian hopes for a better world.
Which I think is...
So this guy sounds like a propagandist for Palestine, right? Like... Piers has previously had a propagandist for Israel, the Rabbi Shmuley. Now here's the propagandist for Palestine.
completely wrong. So I believe all Palestinian people should have exactly the same rights as you and I and every Israeli.
And that requires the end of Zionism. So therefore you support the end of Zionism.
Well, I don't agree with what has clearly been a form of occupation, okay? But putting that to one side, I also don't agree with Hamas, Hezbollah and the Houthis, funded by Iran, armed by Iran, launching wave after years and decades of terror attacks on Israel.
Do they have air forces? Do they have? Let me ask you a question. Let me ask you a question.
Let me ask some questions.
Do they have air forces and air defenses?
Let me ask.
Do they have air forces and air defenses?
So it sounds like you're defending what they do.
No, I'm saying there is a complete difference between one of the most powerful armies in the world, which has literally a key unit within the Israeli military, Unit 9900, is the visual unit which uses satellites in the sky that can pick off a bit of chewing gum on your shoe, okay? You're talking about actors that are shooting rockets which do not have precise targeting against one of the most powerful air forces in the world.
It sounds to me, Lowkey.
F-16s and F-35. You're talking
again, propagandist, right? Like, oh yeah, minimize what my side does as much as possible, maximize what their side does as much as possible. We're the good guys, they're the bad guys. Support us, the good guys. We don't do anything wrong. We're the oppressed people here. Israel has done the genocide. Like, I can predict every single... We haven't done anything wrong. I can predict every one of his talking points.
About asymmetrical warfare. But you know, the thing that Israel doesn't remember, and which Israel has to know and must know, that winning a war is not about killing on an industrial scale the weakest among the population you are targeting, which Israel excels at, which is the essence of Zionism. Winning
My lord.
a war is about the largest amount of people being convinced of your viewpoint. If we use that metric to understand this war, Israel has lost in Gaza and it will lose in Lebanon, because Israel has more enemies around the world than ever before. More people are critical of Zionism than ever before. More people understand it to be essentially an anti-life ideology, which is causing mass human suffering.
Lowkey, at the same
Wait a second. Again, guys, I know my history. This sounds a little bit like something I've heard before. There's a certain book by a certain painter that this sounds like to me. Man, the propaganda wars going on here are like crazy. The real politic going on here, guys, is very interesting. And honestly, what's the word? What's the word I would use here? Sad? Terrifying? Somewhat humorous? That they think we don't see what they're doing?
same time, Hamas, Hezbollah are wedded, and make no secret of being wedded, to the destruction of Israel. The destruction. That is a nihilistic form of genocide. The very genocide that its supporters, like you, would say is being waged against their people. They are explicit. We want the destruction of Israel. And they have tried to enact this on October the 7th. And Hezbollah's response the next day, within hours, was to unleash rockets on Israel as well, and to carry on doing it for a year. At some point, Israel obviously was going to respond with massive force to the biggest attack on its people. Obviously, they were going to do that. Hamas knew they would do that. Iran, who were funding it, knew they were going to do that. Hezbollah knew they would do that. Hezbollah knew if they kept rattling the Israel cage with their rockets, that they would get a response of the kind we're seeing now. What they underestimated is that Israel would be quite as successful as they're being right now with Hezbollah, and taking out all its command leadership. And you can feel that
the journalist looks very angry at hearing this, that his biased viewpoint is not being wholly supported by Piers instantly after he said it.
momentum has switched now, where Israeli people in particular, and all the polling, are now beginning to go back to supporting Netanyahu, because they believe, rightly or wrongly, but they believe Hamas and Hezbollah when they say we want to destroy Israel. They believe it, and they believe that they have to defend themselves. Do you understand that?
I have a response. The Likud platform, which is its charter, states very clearly, there will be no Palestinian sovereignty between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea. The Likud charter calls for the complete obliteration of Palestine and...
Well, didn't the propagandist for Israel, Rabbi Shmuley, didn't he say that they will destroy Palestine and rebuild it with all the good Palestinians living there, something like that? Yeah, no sovereignty is what he said.
All of the rights of Palestinians. That is the core of the issue. One group that you're talking about don't have air defenses and do not have an air force, and are internationally isolated.
As you know.
And are internationally isolated.
And yet they were
the
somehow...
other one has the support of the United States, which has over around 1,000 military bases around the world, and of course, all of the largesse from literally the US after Israel has taken its terrorist actions, which the former head of the CIA, Leon Panetta, called it a form of terrorism in Lebanon with the pager attack. Right after that, the US has said it's going to give $8.7 billion in military aid to Israel.
Was what Hamas did on October the 7th an act of terrorism then?
I would say that the killing by the
Let's avoid the answer.
Israeli Air Force of Israeli citizens
You see, you did avoid the answer.
was an act of terror. I would say that Palestinians who have lived in camps for several generations, they're not
He's avoiding the answer.
in our shoes. They're not living the kind of lives that we live in the places
But you haven't
that
answered
we
my
live.
question.
But I'm answering your question.
No, you're not. You're answering like a politician, avoiding the answer.
To a Palestinian who has suffered their entire life under the boot of Israeli occupation, what you view as justified will not be what they view as justified.
asked you what
the
you
very
think.
same way,
Asked you what you
the
think.
very same way that you denounce figures and define them depending to these particular legislatory definitions. Throughout history, the very same people.
I understand.
You compared yourself to Nelson Mandela.
I understand.
The ANC were absolutely treated in exactly the
British
same
government
way.
called
The
them terrorists.
FLN
I
were
know.
treated in exactly the same way.
know.
The Vietnamese
you're
were
missing
treated
my
in
point.
exactly
You're missing
the
my
same
point.
way.
Okay.
I'm speaking directly to your
You're
point.
not,
In
though.
fact,
You're not answering
William
my question.
William Cuffey of the Chartists.
So, in debate, there's a strategy called filibuster. When you're given a time to speak, you just take up all the time by just talking, and they're not allowed to interrupt you until you're finished talking. So you just talk about inane nonsense not related to the point until the time runs out, and then there's no time for a vote because, well, you filibustered the time.
These were people that mobilized for hundreds of years
I know
to
my
get the
history like you
right
do.
to vote, that didn't own property and were not landed gentry in this
I
country.
hear you.
Do you know what happened to them? They were imprisoned as terrorists.
Okay.
They were massacred at the
I know the same
Manchester.
I know the same history you do, but I simply asked you, given that you categorize what Israel did to Hezbollah with the pages, whether you said it was an act of terror, whether you think what Hamas did to Israelis on October 7th was an act of terror.
Well, if he goes against his own people, he gets assassinated, so I don't think he can do that.
As I said to you then, the picture is not clear of what exactly Hamas
come
did
on,
to
Lowkey.
Israelis. There were lies about 40 beheaded babies
So
that
your
were pumped
response-
out all over the place.
Yeah.
No. There was so much fake news and lies on what happened on October 7th.
Fake news!
How can we
Have you
actually
watched
say,
have you
MAGA! Fake news!
watched the Hamas footage that they took themselves?
seen bits and pieces?
Lordy lord.
Bits and pieces.
Yeah.
Literally bits and pieces of people's
My.
bodies.
No.
That was mean.
No?
What
Really?
I don't understand.
You haven't seen it,
What
have
I
you?
don't understand.
Why
what
don't
I
you
don't
want to see it?
understand. I'm happy to see it, but what I don't understand, no, as in I would like to see these things, but what I'm saying to you, that you are seeming to minimize, in my opinion, is the fact that the Hannibal Directive was implemented. If the Hannibal
So, a
Directive
July
was
20
implemented, if
I'm
a
about
fake
to read you
news
something.
campaign was
I'm about to
rolled
read
out,
you
Filibuster!
something.
Read.
A July 2024 Haaretz investigation revealed the IDF ordered the Hannibal Directive to be used, adding, Haaretz does not know whether or how many civilians and soldiers were hit due to these procedures, but the cumulative data indicates that many of the kidnapped people were at risk exposed to Israeli gunfire, even if they weren't the target. In other words, there may well have been a directive issued, says Haaretz, but nobody knows whether anyone was even hit or killed.
Look at the cars. Look at the cars
hang
fleeing
on.
the Nova Festival.
I've watched the video footage of what Hamas did to people in the cars. But here's my
No,
point, Lowkey.
the-
Here's my
look
point,
at the Nova
Lowkey. Let me
Festival.
finish. My point is, you have extrapolated this and you've taken it to hundreds of people in the 1,200 that were said to have been killed were killed by Israelis.
Yeah.
There is absolutely...
That's documented.
There is zero evidence.
No, there is.
The hundreds
there is.
of people were
read
killed.
the Electronic Intifada. Read the Grey Zone. Read Al Jazeera. Look at the Al Jazeera documentary.
Haaretz
You'll see
in
it there.
July this year, there is no evidence.
No, actually, there is evidence. And Haaretz,
Why didn't they
And
put-
Haaretz pointed some of it out early on.
They didn't. I've just read
At the
it to you.
Eretz crossing, they pointed
I've literally
that an
just read it
airstrike
to
was
you.
called in.
Just say that it exists and it does. I mean, that's That's how life works, right? If we say something exists and you can't prove that it doesn't exist, must mean it exists, right? Flying spaghetti monster type crap.
I've just read to you what they found.
Well, you've read one article which clearly shows that the Hannibal Directive was implemented.
No, a harassed
Let me ask you a question.
investigation.
If an Apache helicopter shoots at a car, what happens to the car?
Have you?
Do you think
Here's the thing,
Hamas? Let me ask you a question. Do you think that the use of AK-47s would cause the damage that was done to those cars fleeing the
I think that because
it wouldn't.
I think because you have chosen not to view the footage that Hamas broadcast to the world, you are incredibly ill-informed about this. And my advice to you, given how
Disaster.
how engaged you are in this whole thing, I'm staggered you just haven't watched that footage. Then
Because he only watches stuff that appeals to him and his perspective. He's in a bubble.
you wouldn't be asking me these questions.
But to the wider issue of what we're talking about, this is far, far bigger than one day.
Yeah, but I'm only asking you.
It's almost become a religion. October 7th.
Understand.
Let's be clear.
But I only asked you one comparison.
Something.
You view what Israel did to Hezbollah, who've been firing rockets at them all year, displacing 70,000 people in northern Israel. You view what they did with those pages as an act of terrorism. I simply said to you, do you think what Hamas did on October 7th is an act of terrorism? And you've been really struggling to give a straight answer.
Let me ask
You're trying to distract me by saying Hannibal Directive,
let me ask you a
hundreds
question.
were killed.
Let me ask you a question. Do you
I'm gonna give a straight answer.
Do you believe in the provisions of the Genocide Convention?
I do not believe what Israel's doing is waging genocide.
That's not what I'm asking.
Do you know why?
That's not what I'm asking you. It's not what I'm asking you. What I'm asking you is Article 1 of the Convention on the Prevention and the Punishment of Genocide says that all parties that are part of this are under obligation to prevent the occurrence of genocide and punish those responsible for its commission. There is a sound argument.
How many
There is
people
a
live in
sound
Gaza?
argument.
How many people live in Gaza?
2 million
Filibuster.
people live in Gaza.
How many have been killed?
Well, I mean, the Lancet Medical Journal has put forth the assertion that 200,000 people's lives have been ended by Israel's operation.
Well, it's completely untrue.
But that's the Lancet
200,000 is 10%. That's huge.
Medical Journal. So
That's a gigantic percent.
Lancet Medical Journal is a more trustworthy source than you. The Palestinians are saying 42,000 as of today.
The Palestinian Hamas-run.
No, but that's not how genocide works. But that's not how genocide works, Piers.
No.
But you know that's not how genocide works.
No, I'm about to tell you.
But you know that's not how genocide works.
So you don't believe the Palestinian Health Authority numbers?
No, I believe them. But what I'm saying
You think 5 times as many people have been killed?
I've literally just quoted to you what the Lancet Medical Association has said, and I've also quoted to you what they have said.
You know why
there.
it matters,
But
right?
that's also not how genocide
why it matters?
works.
I share a lot of your misgivings about the scale and proportionate response of what's been going on in Gaza, and I've said that repeatedly. But I don't think it constitutes a genocide because Israel has the power, should it want to kill all 2 million.
But this
well,
is
let
not
me
the
finish.
argument.
Let me
That's not
finish.
what constitutes
Let me
genocide,
finish.
though.
They have the power to eradicate every single Palestinian.
Was genocide committed on the Aboriginal people of Australia?
Well, I'm not going to go over the whole.
They still exist, so therefore your argument is that they were not subject to genocide following the arrival of Captain Cook.
But do you accept that what Hamas and Hezbollah, when they say they want destruction of Israel, that is the purest personification of genocide?
I have clearly shown you that the Likud Charter states within it that the Palestinians will have no sovereignty.
Why do you never answer any questions about the other
river
side, though,
and the sea?
I asked both.
Because he would never answer. Because he's a propagandist. Come on, Piers.
Because there's a causal connection between what has happened.
But you distract on everything I say.
You're talking to me about organizations that were formed to fight the Israeli occupation. Their response to that occupation is what it is. The occupation exists first. Zionism exists first. What comes after it is a product of that social imbalance.
So you would categorize what they've been doing as resistance, not terrorism?
They are resistance groups, as the vast majority of humanity is represented by governments that define them as resistance factions, including the government of Switzerland. What's more neutral than the government of Switzerland? It doesn't prescribe these organizations.
Oh my God.
For the record.
So to be clear, you think they're resistance, not terrorists?
Yes.
Okay, we got there. Let me bring in Bridget Gabriel.
That was funny, Piers. That was funny.
You listen to what Lowkey has to say. He's not alone in this thought. I've heard this from many pro-Palestinian guests on Uncensored in the last year. What is your response?
Well, I want to start with the accusation of the occupation. Israel was minding its own business ever since it existed.
Yes, always. Yep. They've never done anything bad to anyone ever. Right.
Out to the Arabic world, that wanted to have peace with the Arabic world. In 1964, when the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, was founded, the West Bank was in the hands of Jordan. It was Jordan. And Gaza was in the hands of Egypt. It was Egypt. So the PLO was founded in 1964, not because of any occupation.
I can hear her Russian accent. She's a Russian. Anyway.
They wanted to drive the Jews into the sea and get rid of every single Jew in the Middle East. Israel tried repeating. The only reason the Palestinians lost in 67 and they lost Gaza and the West Bank is because they preempted an attack against Israel. And over again, Israel reached out to them to make peace with them. In 2000,
this guy looks like his soul is leaving his body. The guy on the right.
Iraq offered them 97% of the territories back, and they refused it again and again and again. In 2005, when Israel withdrew out of Gaza, they said, okay, we're going to give you your own state. We're going to give you your own territory. Israel forcibly removed its own people fighting the IDF by force, removed them out of Gaza. Not only removed the people, they dug out dead Jews' bones from the cemeteries because they knew exactly what the Palestinians are going to do to the cemeteries. So in 2005, when Israel withdrew out of Gaza, there wasn't one Jew alive or dead in Gaza. They turned over the key to them and said, okay, great. Now build your own place. You are independent. I know people that Israel even left them the greenhouses. Israel was exporting 50 million flowers to Europe in 2004 out of Gaza. The greenhouses, the fruits, the vegetables, the flowers. They left them to the Palestinians so the Palestinians can start they can have an industry where they can support themselves. I know a businessman from New York who even raised $14 million to make sure the Palestinians will be able to get paid salaries as they move over and they continue building the greenhouses. And what did the Palestinians do within 24 hours after Israel withdrew? Not only they destroyed every single Jewish synagogue in the area, they destroyed the greenhouses, ripped out the pipe, and even stole the copper out of the pipe. And then they had an
disaster. Propaganda wars, guys.
Election. So in their first election, the first woman elected to the cabinet of Hamas was a woman by the name Nidal, the mother of al-Mukawama, they called her, the mother of the resistance. And she ran on the platform, I killed 3 of my sons, because she had videos of her sons, she dressing them in suicide bombers to go kill Israelis. She said, I already gave up 3 for the cause. I have another 7 to give. That's why she was elected. So that's a democratic election for Hamas. Israel.
Oh my lord. Again, crazy propaganda wars going on, guys. Come with the anecdotes, guys. Apparently, if you want to destroy a country, come with the personal anecdotes. Oh man, they got it down to a art form. All right. On that note, let's end the video there. Hit the like, hit the sub, hit all the notifications. Buy my books like Hunter M, Adrian R, Tommy, Bobby, Dylan, Renaissance Press, Brian, Andrew, Alan, Armani, and Nicholas. Shout out to you, most recent purchase of both my books, Strategist Guide to Seduction and Quotes to Live By. You can find my books at bit.ly/heliosbooks. If you'd like coaching, message me at theheliosblog@gmail.com. I'll help you get better at getting girls. Thank you so much for listening, guys, especially if you listen to the end. I really do appreciate it. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time.